This derailment resulted in a loud explosion and evacuation of a whole town in Weyauwega. This is the story of the 1996 Weyauwega train derailment. At approximately 9:49 p.m., 9 a.m., an 81 car Wisconsin Central freight train identified as LO2204 was traveling from Stevenson's Point, Wisconsin to Oshkosh, Wisconsin. At approaching the city of Weyauwega at 48.3 miles per hour, traveling on a downward grade. There were two locomotives heading at the end of the train, where they were identified as Wisconsin Central EMT S45 6525. The train crew was identified as Wisconsin Central GP40 303. The locomotives and the first 16 cars of the train possibly switched out incident. However, the 17 cars weren't so lucky. The 53rd cars behind them derailed as the location of the switch was 9:49:32 a.m. A subject NTSB investigation found the cause was derailed to a broken rail, though within the switch that resulted in a borehole fracture. The rail caused 7 tank cars of liquefied petroleum gas, 7 tank cars of propane, and 2 cars of sodium dioxide. The trail registered 3 tank cars spilling liquefied petroleum gas and propane, which immediately ignited. Conducted on the train after the 9 cars and proceeded almost 115 miles. When the locals were nearby, the scene of minutes around the fireballs were exploding up to 33 and more visible than 30 miles. Fire spread to a nearby female. Both to access by the fire, the of the derailed train was blocking at St. Miles Grade Crossing. High tension power lines were also torn down by the derail, which caused secondary fires in total. 7 of the tank cars of liquefied petroleum gas and propane leaked, and 2 stadium tanks leaked their contents. Electricity and natural gas service of 25% of the city of Weyauwega was disturbed, but the city water had to be shut down because of a rupture in a water main. Jim Bethlehem, the assistant fire chief, the commanding fire chief Gary Hacker was on vacation the day of the accident. Quickly, the fire was beyond the scope of Weyauwega's fire department. Fire crews from 10 surrounding departments were called into a help recovery between 10 minutes and 1 hour after the derailment. It became known as the propane and liquefied petroleum gas were involved in this derailment. 1 hour after the derailment, Wisconsin Central Railroad 4 responding firefighters that the tankers with stand approximately 90 miles. Additionally, the heat had and the train was rolled back to the accident scene and pulled away from the 7 cars that were not derailed. At this point, a decision was made for the fire back from the derailment because of risk of a levee. This evacuation was personal because 2 blocks, 1 hour miles no city ways. The initial evacuation was completely so far soon, and froze where they laid. Berlin also decided to evacuate the entire city of Weyauwega, which had been approximately 1,700 residents of the city and 600 residents surrounding rural areas. The scope of the result of the leaking materials kept residents evacuating just over 2 weeks, and many of the fires erupted resulted of a derailment burned off most of the 16-day evacuation. The weather might have been helped the situation, however, the spread of the terrain was only 10 feet, and there was no distance on the ground. That just helped prevent a levee explosion within the first hour of the While the emergency soldiers were on the site, ultimately, one of the cars containing liquefied petroleum gas was involved in a blizzard, causing a giant fireball over 20 miles after the accident. On March 20th, official in charge of the evacuation and disaster recovery the town safe from the train. Wisconsin Central 6525 was eventually renamed WC 7525 is now owned by the Illinois Museum. And it's on display here. It's currently used for special events hosted in the museum. WC 30 Wisconsin Central 303 pulled excursion trains from McCartney, but eventually suffered from an electric fire and was retired from out of service for good. Subject to investigation that the derailment was caused by an undisturbed fractured heat block in a switch. The fracture had been propagated through several bolt holes. A combining factor was a lock bar had been missing approximately a year. 9 individuals who were affected by a failed class collapse suit seeking reviews and damage was against being caused in March 1996. By the end of the year, 13 additional families and 2 businesses joined the suit against the railroad. Another business was previously sold in Westbrook County Circuit Court. Another company filed a submission suit in the U.S. The strict count of damages both of the suspicious suit were eventually dismissed. In 1998, the railroad estimated the cost of the derailment at $28 million, which is Wisconsin Central paid